Good evening. It is June 25th, 2024. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education meeting. And here is your board president, Shelley Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. And there is nothing to report from closed session. I would like to open the regular session, and it is 7:01. Call to order. Mrs. Lamb? Here. Mrs. Sean? Here. Mrs. Gill? Here. Mr. Chang?
Here.
Mrs. Ryan, I'm here. And next, I would like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I have an approval of the agenda? Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb. Aye. Mrs. Sean.
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And the agenda has been approved. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for June 13th, 2024 meeting minutes? Thank you, Mrs. Gill.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb. Aye. Mrs. Sean.
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. Public comment. The Board of Education has adopted Board Policy 9323B to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have three options to submit public comments. First, you may submit through an online form, and as of 3:30 today, there were no submissions. If there were submissions, it would be provided to the board, but not read aloud. Request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. Dr. Choi?
Thank you, President Ryan. We'll go ahead and pause for 1 minute to take any requests to speak regarding matters that are not on the agenda or items that are in the consent, information, or action sections of the agenda. So if you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card.
Thank you.
In 30 seconds remain, if you'd like to make a request, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. Hey, President Ryan, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. And as there are no requests for the Zoom, next I would like to make sure that we have the consent section. Request to submit public comment. A card has been pulled. I'd like to call Ms. Michael O'Mara up. Thank you, Micah.
Well, it's a little before this section, but I just wanted to speak in support of the board voting for the facilities, to put the facilities bond on the ballot. And Peter Coe and I are looking forward to chairing the committee and garnering community support to pass the bond. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. Next, under the consent section, do I have a motion to approve the consent section 8A to 8H?
Move to approve consent 8A through H.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Second. Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb.
Aye.
Mrs. Sean.
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. The consent section 8A to 8H has been approved. Next, communication section. Communication from the Board of Education. We ask that each board member take no more than 2 to 3 minutes to share their communication. Let's begin with Mrs. Lamb.
Thank you. Today is our very last board meeting of the school year for 23 to 24. Really just want to take a moment to thank the executive team. Thank you, Dr. Delatorre, and our board members for the tireless initiatives we've done this year. Very proud of all of our achievements. And I'm also very proud of the new publications we've had about the seniors that have committed to their colleges. So overall, it's been a great year and looking forward to the new year in August. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Mrs. Chong.
Thank you. So most of my communications revolved around the upcoming bond election. People asked for more information, which was a good thing. They also wanted me to communicate that whatever information we conveyed, they wanted less words on it. Meaning there was a lot of words on the stuff they were getting, and people really would look for things in bold and the headlines and the takeaways. And so they were like, make sure there's just less words when we communicate information out. And the questions they asked were often, they wanted to know when the vote was, how much it would be overall, and how much will the money go towards different projects for parents who had school-age kids, whom we saw to be important in our tracking survey. They really wanted to know how that money was going to be used to improve their own children's and other students' educational experiences. And they were very concerned with seeing that the immediate needs of repairs and maintenance were met, as well as long-term needs and vision to improve and align our facilities with relevant high-quality educational programs. So those were a lot of communications and that I had with people from multiple constituency groups.
Thank you, Mrs. Chong. Mrs. Gill.
I don't really have much of an update. I am also appreciative of all our teachers and staff and the board and our exec team for a great year. I mean, we worked through a lot of things. I feel like we brought a lot to our students this year and continue to enrich their experience. So I think that's really great and commendable. I'm looking forward to sharing more information with the community about our facility needs and just facts about it, and hopefully garnering a deeper understanding about where we are with our facility needs. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Mr. Chang.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the community, to the school parents, students, and the school district executive staff, and my board member. I think we have a very good year, smoothly, and a lot of enjoyment. And so I think this is a very positive result. We should keep doing, yeah. And then the June 14, I observed CareTech graduation. As you know, before I volunteered for CareTech, so I've been so this year they have a NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, you know. So he come from Taiwan, yeah. Before he make a speech, he was in Taiwan 1 week. So make a lot of move for AI. So they are going to AI PC. So I think this is probably a revolution. But I also attached to the Jensen Huang, you know, the story, you know. So he just like a parachute kid, you know. He come to United States alone, yeah. He go to the boarding school, so they assign him. He had to, because he's the junior, so he had to clean up the restroom. Yeah, and then he also had to make a living for to do the part-time job in the Denny restaurant. Yeah. So I think the people successful, there's no, they always have a reason, you know. He just said when you have a hurdle, you know, don't escape, you know. You need to confront the hurdle and keep doing, and then finally you can get the people recognition. Yeah. So I went there. I'm just like take a lesson again. Yeah. I remember the 40 years ago. I come to United States. In the first couple of years, I also have that kind of experience. You know, it's very hard in the beginning. Yeah. And then I also attend my son fellowship from USC K Medicine. So I want to say I finished all the education for my kids. Yeah.
All right.
No more worry about their education or the tuition. Yeah.
All right. With all that money, we're going out to dinner, right? All right. So I want to join my fellow board members in giving thanks to all the people who are sitting here. And Jason's not here, but hopefully he'll hear this message. And we could not do all of this without all of you guys. So thank you so much on behalf of the board and on behalf of myself. I don't think I would be standing upright if it wasn't for all of you guys. So I just want to thank you. I did want to piggyback on Micah's support for the bond, and not to support or advocate for it, but just to kind of review some of the information that I've had recently. And since I have sat on the FAC committee for the 18 months together with Dr. Lynn, we and Dr. Delatorre and all of the doctors up here, we just kind of have a bird's eye view, and I see some people in the audience as well has also worked on FAC with us. But I just wanted to lend some thoughts of my reflection on the process. So the San Marino Unified School District, SMUSD, has been a cornerstone of the community, providing high quality education, shaping future leaders. However, our schools are in urgent need of upgrades and improvements to maintain this standard of excellence. To address these needs without increasing taxes, we propose a facilities bond measure to the vote in November. And obviously, I'm anticipating what is going to be discussed tonight, but I'm hopeful that our district's mission is to provide students with the knowledge and skills to thrive in the 21st century. However, outdated, aging facilities hinder, sometimes often, our ability to deliver on this promise. Some of our schools are built over 50 years ago and lack the necessary infrastructure to support modern education, including updated science and engineering labs and adequate heating and cooling systems. Recent heavy rains have caused flooding in some schools, and classrooms often suffer from insufficient heat or air conditioning. Additionally, outdated electrical systems pose safety risks and limit the integration of current technology essential for modern learning. Upgrading these facilities is crucial for providing a safe and conducive learning environment. Modern classrooms, facilities not only enhance student learning, but also help attract and retain top quality teachers and staff. By investing in our schools, we hope to create an environment where educators can effectively teach and students can excel, making our district a desirable place to work and learn. The district has developed a comprehensive facilities master plan that outlines the necessary upgrades at each school to meet safety standards and support current academic needs. This plan prioritizes the most crucial improvements to ensure our schools are safe, secure, and equipped for modern education methods. The proposed bond measure will include strict financial accountability measures. These include an independent citizens oversight committee and mandatory audits to ensure funds are used as promised solely for the specific school projects, not for administrative salaries or pensions. This ensures transparency and trust in how the funds are managed. Most importantly, this bond measure is designed to fund these essential improvements without increasing taxes. By leveraging existing resources, carefully planning the bond issuance, the district can address these urgent needs while maintaining the current tax rate. This approach makes the bond a financially responsible choice for our community. Bond revenue is the primary means for maintaining and upgrading school facilities. With limited state funding available, local bonds often provide the necessary matching funds to access additional state resources. This ensures that the benefits of the bond measure remain within our district, directly enhancing our local schools without diverting funds elsewhere. The facilities bond measure is a strategic, responsible, and necessary step to ensure that our schools can continue to provide high-quality education in a safe, modern, and effective environment. By voting on this measure tonight, we will invest in our students' future, support our educators, and strengthen our community, all without increasing taxes. Let's work together and keep San Marino schools at the forefront of educational excellence. Thank you. All right. I know Mr. Chang more than 2 minutes, right? All right. So next, would like to call board member. So it's you, Dr. Delatorre, communication.
Thank you, Board President Ryan, members of the Board of Education and executive team. This evening, I'd just like to express my sincere gratitude for the board's leadership and steadfast commitment to the process that we have undergone with the Facilities Advisory Committee. And I do see a member of the audience here who was instrumental in that process. Thank you for your dedication and commitment. It was a long and arduous, comprehensive process that we went through to develop a facilities master plan that really describes the work that needs to be done for the future of our school district. In addition to that, we were able to get a recommendation from the Facilities Advisory Committee to the Board of Education on the potential of placing a bond on the ballot for November 5th. Our schools look fabulous from Huntington Drive. When you drive up and down Huntington Drive and you look at San Marino High School, the exterior, the facade, it's gorgeous. You need to get out of your car and walk the campus to really see the underbelly of the school. Our schools are in a state of disrepair, as many of the board members have already mentioned, especially President Ryan. I look forward to the opportunity to organize and execute tours of each of our schools so that the citizens of San Marino can really take a look at what's going on behind the facade, behind the exterior of the schools, where our kids are learning, growing, and playing every single day. We have had some torrential rains and really had some devastating flooding, electrical panels damaged. We have library roofs that leak, offices that leak, classrooms that leak. It's very difficult to move our students around from one place to another when they're not habitable due to the weather outside. We had a compressor at Carver Elementary School break down in triple-digit heat. We had to send our kids home for the day, which is not good for their continuity in education. And it's also very disruptive for our parents who've gone to work for the day or made other plans. They have to turn around and come back and pick up their kids. So we will do the best that we can, no matter what the Board of Education decides this evening. We will continue to patch things up if we have to, but it is difficult because school districts do not have any resources from the state that we can utilize to repair our infrastructure. We have deferred maintenance money, which is very minimal at best and really only serves to address emergency situations. We have portable classrooms at our elementary schools. We have ample enrollment at those elementary schools. We are now going to be faced with the fact that we need to educate younger students because of the laws around transitional kindergarten. So the school district continues to find ways to address these issues, but it gets harder and harder every year, which is why we really need our community to understand the issues, and we want to work to educate the community, and we also want the community support. And really, it is the community school district So it's up to the community to decide ultimately whether or not they value that. The facilities are important. They house our kids, and our kids really do need to have safe, clean, and modern learning facilities and spaces. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to moving forward after this evening.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Delatorre. Next, we have information items. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Leno Richter to present the 2023-24 LCFF local indicators update to the board.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board and executive team. Tonight, I'm pleased to provide an update on the 2023-24 local control funding formula, local indicators, information item 10A on tonight's agenda. This is a procedural item, as each year the local indicators along with the state indicators are reflected on the California school dashboard. Please advance to the next slide. Thank you. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview on the local indicators which are reported on the California school dashboard each year. Local indicators address the local control funding formula priority areas for which data is collected at the local level. And then lastly, to share next steps to address dashboard local indicators. Thank you, Stephen. The State Board of Education has approved standards for the local indicators to support school districts in measuring and reporting their progress within the appropriate priority area. For the local indicator reporting requirements, districts gather data for each local indicator based on locally collected data or information. Districts will earn a MET on the California school dashboard when progress is reported and measured using locally available data. Results are reported to the local governing board at a regularly scheduled public board meeting. And lastly, when districts upload and publicly report the local indicators through the California school dashboard each year. This slide, thank you, Stephen. This slide reflects the 8 state priorities that must be included in the LCAP. Of the 8 state priorities, 5 are identified as local indicators in which data is collected at the local level, basically at the school district level. These indicators are in blue font, and this data is collected annually at the local level. And we'll go ahead on the next slide and we'll go through each of these. For priority 1, as we saw in a previous slide, it's basic conditions. Districts are to annually measure their progress in meeting the Williams settlement requirements at 100% of all of the school sites. This includes appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum standards aligned instructional materials, and safe, clean, and functional school facilities. For the 2023-24 school year, San Marino Unified has had 0 Williams complaints received for any of the 3 identified on this slide. As a result, this indicator will be marked as being met. Priority number 2 is implementation of state academic standards. Districts identify a locally selected measure or tool to track and summarize progress in implementing the state academic standards. The tool that's selected to measure implementation for the following areas was approved or is approved by the State Board of Education to measure implementation. For this indicator, implementation of academic state standards for all the subject areas that we see on this slide were reported as full implementation and sustainability. Therefore, the status of this indicator is also being marked as met. For priority 3, parent engagement, districts are to annually reflect and measure progress made in parent or guardian and family engagement in the areas of building relationships, building partnerships for student outcomes, and seeking input for decision-making. For this indicator, progress is demonstrated through opportunities for engagement that we have listed on the slide here, quite a lot. Self-reflection, parent guardian, and the California school surveys, which captures perceptions
of progress in building these relationships, in increasing parent engagement, and increasing opportunities for parent input in decision-making processes. Some of these opportunities, as we can see, are listed quite extensively on the bottom of this slide. On the next slide, we see the California Schools Parent Survey, which also shows favorable results for San Marino Unified's efforts in encouraging active partnerships, welcoming participation, and taking concerns seriously. Similarly, staff survey data indicated consistently and slightly improved results. As a result, the status of this indicator is also being marked as met. Priority 6, we see school climate. For priority 6, districts are to administer a local climate survey, we call it the Cal School Survey, every year that provides a valid measure of student perceptions of school safety and connectedness. We utilize the Cal Schools or the California Healthy Kids Survey to gauge our students' perceptions of safety for safety and for school connectedness in grades 5, 7, 9, and 11. Results are shown here below. Student survey data shows an increase in student perceptions of school safety, but not a real significant change in school connectedness. And here we have it overall by grade level, and overall as a school, and then by grade level as well. The indicator for priority number 6 is also being marked as being met. Priority 7 is access to a broad course of study. School districts are to annually measure progress in the extent to which all students have access to a broad course of study specified in Ed Code. We are pleased to announce that 100% of San Marino Unified students continue to have full access to a broad course of study as identified in Ed Code. This does include all student groups, including English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, foster homeless, and students with exceptional needs. They all continue to have access to a broad course of study in all subject areas. Therefore, the status of this indicator is also being marked as met. Now, with regards to next steps, our next step as a school district is to upload the local indicators to the fall 2024 school dashboard. That is due by July 31st of this year. The anticipated launch of the 2024 California school dashboard is December 1st this year, a little earlier than last year. In 2023, it was December 15th. Now, the release of the California School Dashboard will continue to be released earlier for the next 2 years. In 2025, it will be released on November 15th. And in 2026, it will be anticipated to be released on October 15th. Now, these dates align more closely with the public release of CASP data to best provide our community, our parents, our educators, and our students with meaningful information to best participate in decisions to improve student learning. Schools will receive state and local indicator data and engage their respective faculty in review and analysis to determine actionable and measurable next steps. This includes updating their school scorecards to identify areas of strength, desired growth, and a commitment to bold steps to elevate performance and student perceptions. To support site activities and programs that increase and strengthen positive school climate, as well as opportunities to increase parent and guardian participation and engagement. And lastly, once the dashboard is released, we will utilize the data to update the LCAP goals and actions and ultimately contribute to the development of the 2024-2027 3-year LCAP cycle. Next slide. And that concludes my brief presentation of the local indicators for the local control funding formula.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richter, for your presentation. Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead.
I have a question about priority 6. Can we look at school connectedness, and can you share again what that means and the 67%
Absolutely. School connectedness is a question that is on the California Healthy Kids Survey, and it essentially is asking students to rate very likely, somewhat likely, not likely, their perceptions and how safe they feel at school. I'm sorry, school connectedness, of how connected they feel to their school. And so overall, we see 67%, and this is no change from last year. And then it's also broken down by grade level because we feel that it is important to be broken down by grade level because perhaps it's a certain level where there is a sense of connectedness a little bit more than another level. And so what we do each year, once we get this data is looked at and disaggregated at the district level and then organized by school and given to the school sites so they can take it back to their faculty as well and really dive in to see. It's not broken down by individual students, so you can't drill down to the specific student. However, next year, it will be broken down. California Healthy Kids will break it down by student groups. So we can look at English learners, we can look at students with exceptional needs, foster homeless. So that will give us a clearer picture of perhaps where we can put efforts to really increase students' perception of school connectedness. And so the staff sees this, the principal, the high school, school administration all see this. And I think one thing that we are really looking at this year is now that we have a student advisory, superintendent student advisory council is really asking the students as well, what are some things that we can do? What are some things that you allow you to feel more connected to your school, some things that are not, and really hear their voice into the decision-making process so that we can put activities, programs, efforts in place to support students feeling more connected.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, with that, it now becomes an action item, right? I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Richter for approval of the 2024-2025 Local Control Accountability Plan. This is it's an action item.
Yes, thank you, President Ryan. Pursuant to Ed Code Section 52062, the district's proposed 2024-25 LCAP was presented to the board during a public hearing at the June 15th Board of Education meeting for review and public input. Since its presentation, no changes have been made to the plan, with the exception of minor budgetary updates reflecting current actual expenditures. As required by statute, the proposed 24-25 LCAP requires approval this evening and is therefore being presented tonight with a recommendation for the board to take action and adopt the 2024-25 LCAP as proposed.
Thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the accountability plan for the LCAP and that it be adopted. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Chung,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Richter for approval of the Proposition 28 Annual Report of 2023 to 2024.
Thank you, President Ryan. Pursuant to Ed Code 8820, Section G, number 4, all school districts receiving Prop 28 funds shall complete an annual report between May 1st and July 31st. School districts reports must include the following mandated information: the number of full-time equivalent teachers, classified personnel, and teaching aides, the number of pupils being served, and lastly, the number of school sites providing arts and music education with Prop 28 funds. Prop 28 annual reports must be board approved and submitted to the California Department of Education through the Arts, Music, and Schools portal, and lastly, posted to the district's website once approved. Pursuant to Ed Code, although each school is required to create an expenditure plan, it is not mandated that the expenditure plan be posted on the district website or submitted to the California Department of Education. In accordance with Ed Code, all Prop 28 funds were intended and expended to supplement and expand arts and music education programs district-wide. School plans and expenditures were in direct compliance to all statutory requirements. This evening, it is being recommended that the board approve the district's 23-24 Prop 28 annual report.
Thank you, Dr. Richter. Are there any questions or comment at this point? All right, so I'd like to make the motion to approve the Prop 28 annual report.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lam. And with that, may I have a roll call? Mrs. Lam?
Aye.
Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mrs. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. Motion is passed for the Prop 28 annual report. I'd like to now turn it over to Dr. Lin for the approval of the 2024-25 budget. Dr. Lin.
Thank you, Board President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. De La Torre, and executive team. Item 11C is an action item on the 2024-25 proposed budget. Here's a quick recap of the informational presentation to the Board of Education made on June 13th. The total state funds, as we see on the slide, we do not have any information yet about the enacted budget. The legislature is still waiting for the governor to sign it. And this is at the state level, so we will show the numbers from the governor's May revision on this slide, which proposes a total of $288 billion in state expenditures for the 24-25 fiscal year. On the next slide, we see the state's general fund revenues. To the left are the revenues, and then the expenditures are on the right. On the next slide, and I'm going kind of fast because these are pretty much the same slides that you've seen on June 13th. On this slide, these are the funding factors that we used to develop the 24-25 district budget. Now, 3 days ago, Governor Gavin Newsom and Senate President pro tempore Mike McGuire reached an agreement on the 24-25 state budget package. The Assembly and Senate are expected to take action on the numerous bills needed to enact the state budget this week. Fingers crossed, of course. Among these are to provide the statutory COLA of 1.07%, which we see on the slide. And that COLA cascades down to pretty much every funding factor that we have, grade span adjustments, and ADA, and et cetera. Supplemental grants as well. We don't get any concentration grant dollars. On the next slide, the financial projection dartboard remains the same as a basis for our budget calculations. And on the next slide, the key revenue assumptions are also the same as what we saw in the previous board presentation on June 13th. On the next slide, here we have some changes. So we made some adjustments to our expenditure assumptions since June 13th. And so this is the latest snapshot that we have. These are primarily in a small adjustment to books and supplies, a reduction in the cost of debt services because we have now prepaid $2.8 million in our COP, which is the certificate of participation for our Bath Athletic Center, which will save about $4 million. So $2.8 million prepayment will save us $4 million in a span of the next 17 years. Since the reserve for economic uncertainties is 3% of the total expenditures, because we're reducing expenditures because of the prepayment, that the contributions to the REU, the Reserve for Economic Uncertainties, is $7,760 less. That's the 3%. And then that's for the 25-26 year, $7,918 for 26-27 year. Now, these amount to a total of $400,000 reduction, and this is including the carryover adjustments that we made given the most recent information since June 13th. And it's projected expenditures that do not need, so this is the $400,000 that do not need to come out of the $2 million that we currently have in the fiscal stabilization committed fund. So instead of an anticipated expenditure, the fiscal stabilization fund from $2 million down to $1.4 million, as we see on the slide, we're looking at spending that fund down to only $1.8 million. That's an increase in that fund by $400,000. And that difference will help the district remain more solvent by an additional $400,000 in the 2 out years. So this is a good thing that we have seen since June 13th. On the next slide, Here are the revised expenditure assumptions. Books and supplies are projected to be the same. So that was the slight adjustment we made for the next 3 years, which is a little bit over $2 million each year. And the reduction in debt services, as we mentioned earlier, of $230,000 is captured in the other outgo. Other outgo encompasses debt services. The bottom line in expenditures can be seen on the next slide, which shows a reduction in deficit spending since June 13th. We continue to project deficit spending, but anticipate that we will deficit spend less in the 2 out years, primarily because of the prepayment of the COP. So once we prepay, then we could use those numbers, and that's why there was a change. Okay, on the next slide, here are the key components of the ending balance with changes reflected in the 2 out years. We are projecting reductions in school site carryover as sites spend down their dollars, and then fiscal stabilization funds. Also included under the agenda item as a separate document is the REU disclosure, which is the Reserve for Economic Uncertainties. This is pursuant to Ed Code 42-127. Our reserve for economic uncertainties is 3% of expenditures, or a little over $1.5 million. Our total assigned and unassigned fund balance is $9.4 million for 24-25 budget year, $8.8 million for the first out year in 25-26, and $8.6 million for the second out year in 26-27. We are deficit spending, but we have a good reserve to help weather the revenue deferrals agreed to 3 days ago by the governor and the Senate President Pro Tempore. And of course, that's pending enactment by both chambers of the state legislature. The agreement between the governor and the Senate President Pro Tempore amounts to a deferral, and this is state numbers now, a deferral of $3.6 billion. That's state dollars, not local dollars. So that's an agreement reached between two individuals, two very powerful individuals. Now, of course, that's pending, enactment by both chambers. We also are looking at a $246 million in Proposition 98 funding deferral for 24-25 to 25-26. Now, if enacted, this will impact our district's multi-year ending balances, but we do not know yet exactly by how much. This is still very preliminary, and we're waiting for the actual enacted budget along with the trailer bills to provide us guidance. However, even though we cannot put a finger on this yet, we do have multiple opportunities to update the budget throughout the year as we get more up-to-date information as we see in this slide. For example, once we close out the year on June 30th, we have until September 15th to reconcile expenditures for the 23-24. So this is the 23-24 fiscal year. Also, if there are significant changes to the revenues from the state, as we'll see in the enacted budget and any trailer bills, then we have an opportunity to optionally provide a 45-day revision to the budget. Otherwise, we'll take a snapshot on October 31st for the first interim report and another snapshot on January 31st for the second interim report. And this concludes my budget presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have one question. So on the budget assumptions showing our CBEDS enrollment, page, gosh, it's always hard to figure out what page it is. It's not in the presentation, it's in the actual budget. After all the ginormous spreadsheets. Anyway, so it shows that in 23-24, we had our CBEDS enrollment of 2944. And then next year we're looking at 2918, and then relatively flat after that. Oh, yeah, that shows it. So how are we looking at this point in terms of our retention? I'm recognizing that we'll probably be adding students in the fall, which are not reflected in those numbers. And how did we do in terms of retention this year?
So in terms of enrollment, what we do is we roll up the years. First grade goes up to second, second to third. We use the same numbers. And then for kindergarten, what we do is we use a 3-year average. So we've always used this formula. The minute we change that formula, then everybody will question, okay, now you're playing with the formula.
Sure.
In negotiations and everywhere, we use the same exact algorithm. So those numbers are calculated. And then, of course, the snapshots we're going to get in the first interim, second interim, those are going to be more accurate. We'll have the P1 attendance report, P2, and the P final.
I think the same time last year, we saw much lower numbers than what we actually ended up
Mhm.
enrolling in the fall, right?
That's
So-
typical, yeah.
So I guess that's my question is that something that we can relatively safely expect to happen again this fall?
That has been the history, actually. This is a projection and they use the cohort model as Dr. Lynn described in order to provide the projection based on a particular model. But the actual enrollment is typically higher.
Right.
And so you will notice that once we have those numbers.
Okay, so looking at that, it feels a little scary, but it.
Yeah,
shouldn't
I
be
wouldn't
as scary
worry.
as it looks, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry.
So we of course have enrollments, and then when school begins, 2 weeks in, there could be no shows.
Right.
So
Mhm.
a lot could still happen. We're
Sure.
gonna wait till CBEDS, which is the first Wednesday in October, to capture that final enrollment information.
Thank you.
All right. So I need a motion to approve the 24-25 budget, right?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Lamb. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Hi.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
I
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the budget has been approved. I'd like to turn back to Dr. Lin for a second reading of resolution number 15.
Thank you, President Ryan. Item 13D is the second reading and approval of Resolution 15 pertaining to placing a Prop 39 capital facilities bond on the November 5th ballot. We have invited our bond counsel from DWK, Samuel Santana, to answer any questions that the board may have. Samuel, podium's all yours.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, everyone. First of all, Mr. Chang, I just finished paying college tuition too, so I know how full your heart is right now. Coffee tastes better every morning, doesn't it?
It's funny.
Yeah, so my understanding, there was a first reading of the resolution at the prior board meeting. That's not legally required, but I understand you guys wanted to consider it and be able to review and ask any questions of staff. Today, I'm here to answer any questions you might have. As you know, this would put a bond measure on the November 5th, 2024 general election ballot in order for voters within the district to be able to consider voting for or against the bond measure. This would be a Prop 39 bond, which means we would need 55% of the voters who voted on the measure to vote in favor of it in order for it to be considered approved. If you did approve it, it would put it on the ballot, and then the question would be whether voters wanted to approve a $200 million authorization for the district to be able to issue that amount of bonds over whatever the timeline would be that you would work out with your financial advisor in light of your needs, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have on the resolution or the eventual election or bond measure.
Do we have Keygent on the line?
Dr. Choi?
Yes, we do. Chris is on. Let me go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, and happy to answer any questions from the financial perspective.
I would appreciate just a quick review of the overview of what the financial implications will be of the issuance of the bond.
Yes, so as it was mentioned, we're planning for a $200 million bond. We are going forward with the Proposition 39 maximum tax rate, which is $60 per 100,000 of assessed valuation. You can see that detail in the tax rate statement in this document. I think it's Appendix A or somewhere around there. Appendix C, excuse me. That tax rate statement lays out that the estimated tax rate is estimated to be the same in every single year, starting in 2026 through fiscal year 2058. The estimated total cost to the bond would be about $400 million. And we're planning to issue these bonds in 4 installments, approximately every 3 years or so, but that is subject to change depending on the district's facility needs and project timeline. But that's just the preliminary plan at this point.
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. As you know, currently we have one existing the bond, so it's going to sunset. So when the days come in, is that we have a final step, you know, the reconcile from the county we collect those the tax, and then can you predict what happened? Is that will be offset to the zero, or maybe still have some left over you can collect, or you don't have enough? Yeah, you have
Yeah.
to. Do you know my question?
Yes, happy to answer that. So your prior bond measure from the year 2000 has a final payment or a final tax year in 2025. So that would be fiscal 2025. And we're estimating that tax rate to be about $68. So if this new bond measure were to not pass, starting in fiscal 26, the tax rate would be $0. So by adding in this new $60, it's effectively keeping the tax rate as is, so no tax rate increase by approving this new bond measure. Does that make sense? Want to make sure I answered your question.
Oh, so I mean no matter what, you know, they collect the tax by county assessor. So then no matter the number, so we just accept the fact, and then the existing the bond will be ending, right?
That's right. So the county is obligated to collect whatever tax rate is necessary to repay the bonds. So that old 2000 election measure has 1 year left of repayment. So the county will levy a tax of approximately $68 to repay that in fiscal 24-25. After that, they won't need to collect any more tax to repay it. And that's when this new bond would hopefully slot right in at an even lower level to start repaying the new measure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments, Mr. Chang?
And also the second question, I think we already done some survey. So for last 20 years, you know, some of property they already sell a couple of times. Some they still keep as the same owner. So do you think how many percent? I think the more the property already sell, and then they already elaborate the higher tax rate. So do we have this information, or?
I haven't seen that in terms of how many have turned over in the last number of years. I don't know that we have that.
Well, for example, you know, recently there's the highest property the sale for 30 million. So for that kind of property, probably helping for the bond, right? So
Yeah.
they have the new
Yeah.
rate.
Yeah.
They have to collect.
Absolutely, yeah. So it would be $60 on assessed valuation. And so obviously when a house resells, the assessed valuation would increase. So they would have a higher share of that because it'd be 60 per $100,000 of that new assessed valuation.
So with a higher bonding capacity, I think is what Mr. Chang is referring to. So if we have higher sales, like a $30 million property now, does that increase our capacity beyond 200 million?
No, it would not. So if voters approve 200 million, that would be all that we can issue because that's all that was approved. What it would do though is that we are projecting a 4.5% assessed valuation growth rate per year. So the growth that your tax base will grow each year. If that is exceeded, let's say you grow 5 or 6% per year because you have multiple $30 million properties turning over, that will just bring the tax rate down slightly. So instead of being at $60, it may end up being at 59 or 58. if your tax base grows by more than we're projecting.
And that's reassessed every year by the assessor,
That's
not
correct.
by.
Yeah, so we're locked in right now, and right now the $200 million is based on our projections over the next whatever number of years you went out on. So that's projecting 4.5% growth, and that's how we got to the $200 million. If it grows more, or if there's a lot more turnover in property, we have more capacity, we're not going to be able to capture that, but it will lower the tax rate. So.
Is there a scenario in which, because I think this 200 million is based on this 4.5% assessed valuation rate. So is there a scenario in which by the end of it, should interest rates be in our favor, that we may end up with more money than we thought we would have? I think we saw Arcadia experience something like that. Kind of a weird situation, or is it more likely that the opposite would happen?
I mean, you would pay lower interest rates on your issuance, so you would have, you know, a lower cost. I don't know that you would end up, your authorization is going to be $200 million.
So I guess maybe that might be how it worked out, right? Like if we ended up with paying less interest over time, then perhaps there ended up being more money at the end that was set aside. Because I think part of this conversation we keep having as well is, even though we're taking 200 million out, we're not planning to spend all 200 million, and we're reserving at least 1/3 of that. So if the interest rates are in our favor, is there a scenario in which we may end up having more money at some point?
Hi, Joy Coomer from
Joy.
Team Civics. Good evening, Madam President, board members. And Chris here can also help. So, you know, we've been looking at this for, you know, almost 2 years now. The 200 million is based off of a lot of factors that Keyent has sort of built for you to make sure that we are developing a plan that is not only maybe, you know, fiscally sound, but also, you know, allows you to make sure that you can begin to implement the bond program over many years. This is very typical for all school districts, right? And in determining how much you can totally take out, there are several factors. And we know at one point, and perhaps, you know, Chris can verify, at one point though, Chet had talked about how I think it was nearly 50% of your homes were still assessed at this because people had owned their homes for so long. And I think this is what we were sort of talking about before, right? There, like 50% of your homes were assessed so low that that sort of was one of those factors that was playing into this $200 million amount, right? And it is true that you're holding back a certain percentage of that, but that is more for construction escalation costs, not for like holding it back and anything else. So over the period of time, you're still 200 million is always going to be the maximum amount that you can issue. You can sometimes issue those faster if your assessed valuation happens faster or interest rates go lower. Sometimes you can pay off the bonds faster. Those will all be things that the board looks at over the next, you know, 8 to 10 years as you're implementing this bond process. And should you have more homes that turn over and sell for that higher value, that could, you know, allow you to start issuing more bonds. But again, there are also other factors that are in play, such as when you issue those bond funds, you're going to draw down that money. And by the state, you have to spend it within 3 years. And you have to sort of plan your facilities, you know, rollout so that as you're spending it, you can meet that 3 years. So it's not very often, for example, that you can, you know, do like a single issuance bond where like we get all the 200 million at once, because not many school districts could complete that many projects within 3 years. You have to imagine like moving students, working on this building, kind of addressing all of those different things. So what you're looking at tonight and what you're considering is the beginning of a process that you will continually revisit over the next 8 to 10 years. Is that helpful?
Yes, I guess what I'm thinking more along the lines of is the other side of it is in terms of the spending power, right? Because we don't know, and that's a crystal ball kind of a question,
Right.
right? We don't know what our spending power will be, and so we're safer off being more conservative. And I guess my question probably just doesn't have an answer.
Well, because the other side of it is you could, like, let's say, for example, you said, well, we want to authorize 300 million, right? We want to do the same thing and authorize 300 million. You know, in some districts that has created a problem where, yes, they had this huge authorization, but they couldn't actually issue any of those bonds because they couldn't meet all the other factors in order to do that. And they sort of call that being locked out. So, right, you have all this money, but you cannot access it because you're not able to meet all the criteria in order to be able to access those bonds. So I do think the plan that you have is a really fiscally responsible plan that was, you know, thoughtfully developed over the last couple of years. And you'll be able to make decisions over the 8 to 10 years that will help you make sure that you're using the money to the best ability. And Chris, I'm not sure if you have a specific answer about Arcadia. I do not, so I can't speak to what happened there.
And I don't know the specific details of that circumstance. It was one of those, you know, neighbor to neighbors conversations.
Yeah.
I just remember them saying that they didn't spend all the money that they received.
Right,
That they
which is
had
in-
money left over,
right.
which was they were under budget with their construction.
Which
was
is
surprising.
interesting because if they had to spend it within a certain number of years, but maybe because they did it under the previous proposition and there were different terms. I mean, I don't know what the
Yeah,
circumstances.
yeah, I don't know the circumstances
I
there.
heard they were going out again.
That they are going out
They're
again.
going out again.
Yeah,
for
this
another-
November. And so is San Gabriel
everybody
and
is.
several of the school districts in this area are going out again this year.
Yes.
So it seemed from previous presentations with Keaton, the takeaway and what I'm hearing again tonight, so correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to use less words, right? So that the timing of the project needs and the economic conditions are going to be dynamic. And we will really, and that will really drive and also be driven by the priority of the projects. So as much as we want to be able to know everything, ultimately, we're going to have to be flexible to the situations and economic and construction situations as they arise. Is that about it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
This is,
flexibility. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, as Joy mentioned, that this is the beginning of a long process. You know, we will be presenting to you, I'm sure, on an annual, if not far more frequent basis, to give you updates on the status of your tax base, your assessed valuation growth, major turnover of homes, that sort of thing. Anything that impacts your bond program, so we can come to you and say, hey, we had said issuances every 3 years, but if you have the facility needs, maybe we can issue every 2.5 or every 2 years. So this is definitely, we have a plan in place. I think it's fiscally sound, prudent, but it will fluctuate throughout the life of the bond program based on your needs and the economy, overall economy.
Thank you.
And the proposed payback term is 30 years?
That was
33.
That's right. 2058 is our estimated final year of tax.
Again, that could also fluctuate, right?
That's right. So that's built on interest rate assumptions of 4.6% to 5.1%. We've been in the market this week with a few other California school districts selling bonds, and they've come in just under 4%. So we definitely have some conservatism built into our interest rate assumptions for the life of the bond program. And that may be what you heard from Arcadia, that they built in conservative interest rate assumptions and it came in far lower, thankfully. That doesn't impact the amount of money they receive, but it would impact the amount the taxpayers are paying. Arcadia may have also had projects that came in under budget. I've actually been hearing a lot of that in the last year or so. So many districts were burned during COVID when they didn't have enough cushion built into some of these projects and the estimated cost for them. With construction cost escalation, things were coming in, 20–25% higher than they had estimated. But in recent years, I think districts have started being more conservative, and now projects are coming in under budget, which would allow you to do even more projects. So I know you have a cushion built in, and I hope that you have that same outcome throughout the life of your program.
Yeah, one of the ways that I heard a district talk about it is you have your cake, which is your structure of all the projects you hope to do. And should you have favorable conditions, you'll have projects that are your icing, right? They'll be the things that you'll be able to do that are sort of on our wish list now. They're on our extend list right now. But maybe you'll be able to accomplish some of those things should we get favorable conditions.
We have $338 million worth of work and the $200 million bond. So I think we haven't even gotten half. But we'll eat as much of the cake as we can.
Exactly, exactly. Be flexible.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. If you have a question, go ahead.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to share my comment before the board to vote for this action item. As you know, I just mentioned this month I finished my all the kid education. They finished the fellowship with a medical school. So mean the 30 years ago, my kid was in the kindergarten, and then the time we also initiate for my age, the parent, so we initiate the bond. So mean the 30 years, our generation initiate the bond and make the school district facility the better, and then the student they can utilize in the normal condition, have with the quality education. So my generation, we appreciate, and we also is a benefactor. And those kids right now is from 35 to 45, and they are successful in the society. So today, after 24 years, I'm still serving for the board. Today, I want to share my colleague, we are doing for the student future. Yeah, we are doing for your kid because your kids still young. I ask the witness, I think for this small school district, we cannot depend on the fund from the government, and nobody will help us. So we have to decide whether we want to take action to move for this item, this agenda. If we don't, the student may not have the suitable and the quality surrounding environment for learning, and the teacher cannot do the teaching. So I think this tonight is very important for us to make a decision. And also I remember the 8 years ago, the time we initiated the bond resolution, and some of the community members, they think we are not enough transparent. So tonight I want to say, because for the 20 years, I collect all the data here. So including the last year, we open the application, and then the community people apply for FMC, the Facility Advisory Committee. So everyone contribute the idea, opinion, and advice to the school district. Besides that, school district already did 3 times matter. So each matter is very meaningful and informative. For example, this one, they also recording what we did for the meeting. So I think this one, is almost, with the last year or the beginning of this year. So we did a 35 meeting and a 9 leadership meeting and 4 focus group meeting and a 9 school site input, and a 5 facility advisory meeting and a 2 community partner meeting and 2 board meeting. So this involved to the 121 participant and 125 student survey participant and 536 community survey participant. So I think it's enough. We inform the community and we are the transparent. And besides that, we have a second matter and then this is the third matter. So third matter, we also inform the community. Tonight, we are going to have an action item. We are going to vote whether we will approve for the bond. So I feel I asked the board member, I feel very comfortable in terms of the transparency, in terms to inform the community. I think we did our best to inform the community. And besides that, you know, this smaller community, most important is education. Without education, I think the San Marino will not be the San Marino anymore. So I think we are fine. Tonight is doing the things like 30 years ago, we make a decision and then we change the facility quality and adapt the time, the code, and make a student, they can do the learning and make a teacher can do the teaching. So I hope that tonight, we one more time, we can make our best choice and a benefit to our next generation. I think that is very important. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. I really appreciate your personal take on it as well as your history and account of some of the past decisions that were tough. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 15? I'd like to make the motion pertaining to the potential general obligation bond.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. And so with that, I'd like to do roll call. Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong.
Before I voted, I just wanted to share my why.
Oh, you have more comments?
Yeah, I wanted to wait till the actual vote.
This
Just
is
so-
the actual vote.
Right.
So you want me to pause?
If you will indulge me, thank you. The facilities master plan has shown us that we have significant needs, not wants, but needs. We cannot pay for what we need any other way than with the bond. Otherwise, without this money, when the next thing breaks down, we will have to cut staff and programs to pay for it. But with the passage of the bond measure, the district will be able to pay for basic repairs, address the needs on the brink of breakdown, and modernize our facilities to ensure learning continuity. We do not want to send kids home because of our air conditioning breaking down or our roof leaking or our basement flooding. In addition to that, in the face of our changing climate, we do not have facilities that are ready to respond to those demands, whether that is intense heat, air quality, poor air quality, water scarcity, or torrential floods. And more than just basic facilities, we want our kids to feel a sense of pride when they bring their grandparents to open house or invite their siblings to their school showcase events. When we invite prospective students to our facilities, we want them to be impressed and choose to attend school here. We want families to see our schools and make the investment to buy a house here and have a place for their children to call home for many, many years to come. The San Marino community is hard pressed by the state of California to take responsibility for financing the upkeep of our school facilities. Though this puts the financial burden on us as a community to maintain our buildings, it also gives us a lot of independence and ownership over what we want to accomplish to ensure our facilities align with our community values. Right now, as has been our history, our community continues to value public education as reflected by the most recent passage of the renewal of the parcel tax in June 2021, Measure E, with nearly 74% of our voters voting yes. And I have full confidence that if we humbly communicate our needs and hold ourselves accountable to the public, this measure will find the same success. That is a yes by 55% of voters in November will bring in $200 million without increasing taxes. As Mr. Chang said, we want to be here for the next generation of children, just like we are here because of the sacrifices made by the generation before us when they passed the bonds in 96 and 2000. My own children benefit and continue to benefit from the work that was performed in 2000, and I want to pay it forward to the next generation. And so for this reason, I vote yes on the resolution 15 to put the measure on the November ballot.
What's your vote?
I vote yes. Oh, yes.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and motion has passed for resolution number 15. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Delatorre for approval of resolution number 16.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education Executive Committee. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt resolution number 16, which is appearing before you on the screen, to establish a maximum word limitation for Board of Education candidate statements at a maximum of 200 words, and determine that the payment of the maximum estimated cost must be made by the candidate at the time of filing.
Any questions or comment? No?
Move
Okay.
to approve.
So you'd like to make the motion, Mrs. Gill? I will, and Mrs. Lamb has
I will
second.
second it, yes.
Thank you. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Chang.
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, I'd like to turn it, and the motion has passed. I'd like to turn it back to Dr. Lynn to present 2024-2025 certification of signatures.
Thank you, President Ryan. 13F is a routine action item to seek board authorization for the administrative staff to sign notices of employment, contracts, and orders drawn on the funds of the district. These certifications are made in accordance with the provisions of Ed Code, and the approved signatures are valid for 1 year to June 30th, 2025.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Are there any questions or comment regarding this? All right, I need a motion for certification of signatures.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. Chong. Thank you, Mr. Chang. Roll call, Mrs. Lamb,
Aye.
Mrs. Chong,
Aye.
Mrs. Gill,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. And last but not least, Superintendent Dr. Delatorre, are there any discussion items, or Mr. Chang, any discussion items?
I actually have something.
Okay.
If nothing else. I wanted to share something, after we passed that resolution 15 and 16, I felt this would be an appropriate time to share this, not wanting to steal thunder from anything, but also wanting to give the community time. After much careful thought and consideration, I have decided to not seek re-election in November. I want to be present for my children as they start college and middle school after the next school year. I'm also looking forward to my volunteer work as a San Marino High School Grad Night Chair and as a trustee for the San Marino Schools Foundation, where I can continue to serve all students. Serving the San Marino community as a governing board member since 2020 has been a humbling and gratifying experience. One of the biggest goals I had when I was elected was to serve the community with respect for our community's diverse interests and concerns. And so whenever anyone shared with me either their praises or concerns, I was thankful that they entrusted me with this information. And I sought to use the information to collaborate with everyone around solutions that would move our district forward. First, forward through the pandemic and then out of it. And then as we sought to find a new normal with the introduction of new administrators, programs, bell schedules, and priorities. And finally, as we spent this past year focused on the facilities and financing needs of our schools, I am thankful to the many, many members in our community who had and continue to have an open mind, sharing their knowledge and expertise with me with the hope that we would advance a facilities master plan that would lead us into the next era of our district. While I wind down my last 5 months on the board, I will continue to advocate actively for all students, promote the educational values in our community, and make myself available to anyone who wants to partner with our schools for the future success of San Marino schools and students. So much has been accomplished in the past 3.5 years by this very responsive board. The accomplished administration, dedicated faculty and staff, and the generous community of volunteers and contributors. To you, my board and my administration, I thank you especially for indulging my many, many questions and my very exacting standards. I know I did not make your jobs easy for you, and I appreciate all of you immensely. I have full faith and confidence in this board and this administration to continue to operate at the highest levels of educational progress, engagement, and integrity. I hope that whomever fills my seat will be dedicated to respecting the role and all that it demands, while collaborating with everyone to envision success for our district and continuing to uphold a premium public school experience that puts students first. Thank you, truly. Thank you. Thank you. Back to you.
Mr. Chang, did you have anything?
Well, I I think I'm the last one to be informed. So
I told him earlier.
yeah.
Have you heard it?
Well, I think the serve for the school board, especially in the small school district, especially we are not a city council, so there's no glory, you know. I know we have a candidate running for city council here. I tell you, every day after 24 years, everyone always ask me, do you want to run for city council? Look like they disregard my 24 years working for a school district. But you know what? Every day, you know, I get up. So I always expecting is a superintendent have some the notice like some emergency or the kid or whatever. But if no fear, where is another good day? Because I think the 5 school board member, we know we are responsibility. This no reward job, but it's a very important. I tell you the only reward I have, you know, because I already 24 years. When I go out, you know, some of the alumni they see me in the airport or maybe in Hawaii. So sometimes they say, "Oh, I know you." so I think that's the only reward. So even better than the city council. That's my fear. So, well, I know you have the big mission. I think working as a parent and continue support for PTA. That's also important, or even more important, because this school district without a PTA, we cannot do anything. Yeah. So I appreciate work with you, because I also learn from you. You are the expertise like a data analyst. Yeah. So my background is the public health. So I think I also need emphasize about the data reading. You know, make sure. I think maybe the next 2 years I will do more attention about the student learning the data. Yeah. If you are not here. Yeah.
It's better than patients in a hospital.
Yeah. Well, I think your kids still very young, so anytime you can reconsider.
You're right.
Okay,
During this meeting.
Dr. Delatorre?
I do have something very important. Our next meeting isn't until August 13th. So I just wanted to remind the board, and I hope that you have a wonderful, restful summer with your amazing families. But also I wanted to call attention to the fact that this will be our last board meeting with Dr. Michael Lynn, because I believe his last day is Thursday. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I wanted just to just acknowledge that and to say, thank you so much for your dedicated service over the past 9 years. You have been a consummate professional, and we really appreciate all that you have done to contribute to our success in San Marino. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to make sure that the board knew that this was the last time you will see him sitting here. in this
On the
capacity.
dais. He's
On the
still
dais.
around as a parent next year.
He's still a parent for 1 more year, so we will still have him in that capacity. and we're
We'll be
grateful
pulling
for-
those cards.
Yeah, that's right. You can come and speak. Oh, that means he can campaign for the bond, right? Micah, make a note. Yes,
So
thank you.
Catherine, don't question on the budget, on the Stephen Choi.
Okay, questions from him.
Well, he's Stephen's mentor, so if he's questioning that, then.
Jennifer's
we
gonna
have a
say, it's
problem.
not a comment, it's just a pie chart.
All right. With
Okay.
that,
Mhm.
I'd like to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.